If at any point you decide that you don't want that to be flat anymore, you want to have a little bit of depth to it, instead of having to go in and recreate everything again with an extruded text, what we can always do is click on this track shape, and instead of having a one-sided plane, we can change this now to an extrusion. And as soon as we do, everything else stays the same, but we now have fat extruded text. And we have a new tab up in our controls, which is called extrusion. And so I can now change this and take the extrusion down or make it really, really fat. I'll make it rather small to begin with. I can change the bevel amount, so we can have convex, concave, or even a custom bevel shape. I'll keep this at straight. And we can change our bevel amount just a little bit, so we can have just a smallest bit of bevel and a small bit of bevel depth. Now, something we haven't looked at yet, but is very, very cool, is the fact that we have a whole load of style presets created for us. So we have a library of text styles, font styles, gradient styles, spline styles. But here's the one we're going to look at first, and that's extrusion styles. It's at this point we can also, if we've got one that we like, and it's not, we haven't done a lot of work to this, but we maybe like this as a simple starting point, we can always just hit plus, add a style, and give it a name, simple starting point, and there it is. And if I want to use one of these different ones, I can just double click on it, and it will update my extrusion straight away. And I want to come back to my simple starting point, well, there it is there. So these libraries are a great way of building up resources, either use yourself in different projects or share around in a work group so that everyone has the same assets available to them. Now, if we come up along from extrusion, we come over to material, we can choose how many materials we're going to use to wrap around this particular layer, this particular 3D text. At the moment, it's set to 1. So it means that we're going to use one material going around the whole text. And if we have a look down on the timeline, we can see that material pop down there. It's front material. It's currently set to color. If I click this to 2, we have a new one, which is an extrusion material. So we can have the extrusion in a different color with different textures, different properties, and we can go 3 or 4, and 4 will do one for the front, one for the back, one for the extrusion, and one for the bevel. Now for us, I think I'm just going to start with 2 to begin with, and we're going to have one for the front and one for the extrusion. And I'm going to make the extrusion a little bit bigger here. We're going to see the difference in just a moment. I'm also going to come back into my 3D container, and I'm going to turn my third light on here, and I'm going to make a new light. And this is going to be behind, or almost behind, the text. Have it over here. That's it. So we're going to get something filling in the side edge just there. Cool. So once we've got our light set up, let's come into our material. We're going to start with the front material here. And currently it's set to color. And we can have this set to flat color as well, which means it's not going to take on any of the lighting. So it's just going to be completely flat, showing out there. Or I'll change that back to color. You can see it's now taking the lighting back on. And we can choose something like the diffuse. Let's give it a slightly golden. We can change the material so it feels different. So it feels a different sort of reflection. So it reacts with the light in a different way. In terms of the specular strength up, here you can see that it's picking up the specular highlights a lot more. And just as we had with the extrusion, we do have material styles as well. So I can apply a corroded metal to this, or a chrome. Maybe a sort of brushed gold there. There we go, nice. And with the extrusion, we can come in and we can choose a completely different texture. So maybe something, or subtly reflective texture. If I go back into my styles there, we can see that this preset is working off a texture. So it's got a texture map, which is taking the color from a separate file. It's got a bump map, which is giving it a little bit more structure to the otherwise flat text. So if we have a look now at our bump strength in the attributes, if I turn that up, you can see we've got a much rougher texture going in there. Turn my bump map back down again. And we've also got a reflection map that it's taking from another file as well. And we can change these files that it's taking it from just by clicking on the right-hand icon, which is currently saying it's an image file. And we go in and we can choose a different image file if we want to. And that's now affecting the extrusion. And if we had multiple tracks, I'm just going to duplicate this track up. And I'm going to call this one line 2. And let's just move this one out of the way. So change the position on it. Move that down, change the rotation on it as well. It's rotating slightly differently. Yeah, once we've got multiple lines going on, or multiple objects going in within the same container, we can come in and animate up that container. So we can animate up multiple objects just using the one simple container. So each object in itself has its own set of transformations, its own position, as we can see here and here. And the container itself can also be transformed up, so we can rotate that, scale that up, and do whatever we need to. And if we're wanting to add motion blur, we will add that at the container level to enable that motion blur there, rather than on a layer by layer basis. One more thing we can do when we're working with 3D objects, like the 3D text here, is we can also use deformers. So we can do fun stuff like bend, taper, and twist. We can warp stuff around. And of course, we can do these things either on the container itself or on each of the individual 3D objects. Flatten. Now this will turn our 2D object into a 3D object. Or we can do some weird and wonderful things to distort it. Just there. There we go. But you can experiment with those yourself. There's a lot of different deformers you can work with. So we've taken a look at the basic ideas behind some of the 3D object work. We've taken the flat 3D text with 3D light capabilities, added an animated 3D light, changed that text into fat extruded text, added materials and bump maps, and had a look at some of the deformers as well. In another tutorial, we also look at how we can import Cinema 4D objects and work with those directly within Title Studio.